I will not marry Adanna. If I must choose between the throne and the woman I love, I choose Ifeoma.
Ifeoma? A palace servant? Kosi, have you completely lost your mind?
No, Mother. I know exactly what I'm doing.
Your Highness, you shouldn't be doing this. That pendant, where did you get it?
This? It belonged to my mother.
Your mother? Who was your mother?
I don't understand.
Enough!
Ifeoma Eze had worked in the royal palace for almost 3 years. She was 26, quiet without being timid, respectful without behaving like a slave, and hardworking without allowing people to treat her dignity as something they had purchased with her salary. Most people in the palace knew only a few things about her. Her mother had died when she was young. The woman who raised her afterward, Mother Nneka, lived in a small town several hours away. Ifeoma sent part of her wages home every month. She rarely complained. And around her neck, beneath her clothes, she always wore an old bronze pendant her mother had left behind. It was not beautiful enough to attract thieves. That was precisely why nobody had paid attention to it. Ifeoma herself believed it was simply the only valuable thing her mother had possessed. One afternoon, a young kitchen servant named Adaeze accidentally shattered an imported serving bowl. The bowl had been part of a set Queen Nneka treasured. Adaeze panicked. Her younger brother had recently undergone surgery, and almost everything she earned was being sent home. She knew that if she lost her job, her family would suffer. When the head steward demanded to know who had broken the bowl, Ifeoma saw Adaeze shaking. She also knew Adaeze had been carrying the bowl because Ifeoma had asked her to help move several items from the dining room. So Ifeoma accepted responsibility. The punishment was severe. Almost half her monthly salary was withheld. She was assigned extra work, and she said nothing about Adaeze. Prince Kosi happened to learn the truth. Not because Ifeoma told him. He overheard Adaeze crying while thanking her. Kosi could not understand it. He had grown up in a world where people fought to protect themselves. Palace officials blamed one another. Politicians changed loyalties whenever power shifted. Even members of his extended family smiled at one another while calculating what they could gain. Yet this servant had willingly lost half her salary to protect another servant. Later that evening, Kosi found Ifeoma scrubbing one of the palace corridors. He expected gratitude when he informed the steward that her withheld salary should be restored. Instead, Ifeoma was displeased. Kosi had expected her to thank him for rescuing her. Ifeoma believed he had missed the point. Adaeze was still terrified. The palace system had created an environment where a broken bowl mattered more than whether a struggling girl's family could eat. For perhaps the first time in his adult life, Prince Kosi was told that solving one person's problem with royal authority was not the same as understanding why the problem existed. It irritated him. Then it stayed in his mind. Days later, he discovered that Ifeoma had been right. He asked questions he had never bothered asking. He learned how much junior palace workers earned. He discovered that some worked extremely long hours because senior staff were afraid to complain upward and instead transferred pressure downward. He ordered changes. Ifeoma did not praise him. She simply noticed. That irritated him even more. But slowly, irritation became curiosity. Kosi began noticing things about her. He noticed that she carried leftover food to an elderly groundskeeper who sometimes forgot to eat while working. He noticed that she read whenever she had a break. He noticed that she could discuss history, politics, and agriculture far better than some of the wealthy young people invited to palace functions. He eventually learned that she had once hoped to attend university, but had abandoned the plan when Mother Nneka became ill. Kosi offered to pay her tuition. Ifeoma refused, not because she did not want an education. She refused because she did not want a prince turning her future into a favor she would someday feel pressured to repay. That refusal stunned him. People usually wanted something from Prince Kosi Ajanaku: money, access, contracts, appointments, introductions, status. Ifeoma wanted none of it. She wanted to earn what belonged to her. For the first time, Kosi became interested in a woman who seemed completely unimpressed by the fact that he was a prince. And Ifeoma slowly discovered something about him too. Behind his confidence was a man who had spent most of his life being prepared for a position he had never been allowed to question. His schedule had been planned, his education had been planned, his public image had been planned, and now his marriage was being planned. The woman selected for him was Adana Okafor. Adana was intelligent, sophisticated, and highly educated. Her father controlled a business empire and maintained relationships with several powerful political figures. A marriage between the families would strengthen the Ajanaku dynasty financially and politically. There was nothing obviously wrong with Adana. That was what made the situation more difficult. She was not a wicked rival. She simply believed the arrangement made sense. Queen Nneka believed it made even more sense. To the Queen Mother, marriage had never been primarily about love. Marriage protected dynasties. Marriage created alliances. Marriage preserved bloodlines. And bloodline was almost sacred to her. She had spent decades reminding everyone that the Ajanaku family could not be diluted by careless choices. So when she noticed Kosi spending increasing amounts of time speaking with Ifeoma, she acted quickly. Her first approach was civilized. She warned Ifeoma. She explained that servants often misunderstood kindness from powerful men. She reminded her that princes could enjoy friendships ordinary men could not afford. But marriage was different. Ifeoma understood the message. She stayed away from Kosi. Kosi noticed immediately. When he confronted her about the sudden distance, Ifeoma refused to become the reason he fought his family. That was when Kosi realized his feelings had become more serious than curiosity. He missed her. Not her face, her presence. He missed the one person in the palace who could tell him he was wrong without trying to humiliate him. He missed the way she forced him to examine himself. He missed the calmness he felt when they spoke. He missed being Kosi instead of Prince Kosi, so he continued seeking her out. Queen Nneka noticed again. Her second approach was money. She summoned Ifeoma privately and offered enough money to transform her life. A house, a business, tuition, financial security for Mamangozi. All Ifeoma had to do was leave the palace and never contact Kosi again. For a moment, Ifeoma stared at the documents. It was more money than she had ever imagined possessing. Then she pushed them back. She did not refuse because she was already planning to marry Kosi. At that point, she had not even allowed herself to believe such a future was possible. She refused because accepting the money would mean agreeing with the Queen Mother that her dignity had a price. Queen Nneka never looked at her the same way again. Until that day, Ifeoma had been a problem. After that day, she became a threat. Kosi's feelings continued growing, but Ifeoma resisted him. She understood something he did not. A prince could fall in love with a servant and call it bravery. The servant would be the one accused of seduction. The servant would lose her job. The servant would be insulted. The servant would be called ambitious. If the relationship failed, the prince would remain a prince. The servant would carry the scandal. Kosi finally understood when rumors began spreading through the palace. People who had once eaten beside Ifeoma stopped sitting with her. Some servants whispered that she was trying to become queen through Kosi's bedroom. Women from wealthy families mocked her education and clothing. Queen Nneka did not need to order most of it. Class prejudice did the work for her. Kosi became furious. Ifeoma became more distant, and instead of chasing her with gifts, he did something she did not expect. He listened. He stopped asking her to trust promises that cost him nothing. He began showing her that his feelings could survive inconvenience. When she told him she needed space, he gave it. When palace workers blamed her for distracting him from royal responsibilities, Kosi worked harder rather than abandoning those responsibilities. When the king questioned why his son had suddenly become interested in workers' conditions and village development programs, Kosi admitted that someone had forced him to see how little he understood about the people he might someday rule. He did not name Ifeoma, but Queen Nneka knew. Then came the night Kosi found Ifeoma sitting outside the servants' quarters after receiving news that Mama Ngozi's health had worsened. Ifeoma had spent most of her savings on treatment. For once, she was exhausted enough to stop pretending she could carry everything alone. Kosi sat beside her. He did not offer money. He did not promise to fix everything. He simply remained there, and for the first time, Ifeoma allowed herself to tell him about her childhood. She remembered very little about her biological mother, only fragments, a lullaby. The smell of shea butter, a woman running with her one rainy night, a terrible argument, and a strange phrase her mother used whenever she touched the pendant around Ifeoma's neck. Her mother had called it the piece that would take her home. Ifeoma had always assumed home meant family. Neither she nor Kosi knew that the phrase meant something far more literal. That night changed their relationship. Curiosity had become respect. Respect became emotional connection, and emotional connection was becoming love. Queen Nneka saw it happening and understood that warnings and money had failed. So she escalated. During an important palace celebration, Ifeoma was accused of stealing a gold bracelet belonging to Adana. The bracelet was found inside Ifeoma's room. The evidence appeared undeniable, but Ifeoma refused to beg. She insisted she had not taken it. Queen Nneka ordered her searched publicly before members of the household. Nothing else was found. Still, the humiliation was complete. The Queen Mother dismissed her immediately. Kosi arrived too late to stop it. When he demanded an investigation, his mother accused him of allowing desire to destroy his judgment. The king sided with the Queen Mother, and Ifeoma made a painful decision. She left. She refused Kosi's offer to take her somewhere else because she did not want her innocence to depend upon a prince protecting her. As Ifeoma bent to lift her bag, the bronze pendant slipped outside her clothes. Princess Urena saw it. The old woman stopped breathing for a moment. She had last seen that symbol 27 years earlier on the neck of Princess Oluchi of Umuagu, a princess who had disappeared after a forbidden relationship, a princess everyone believed had died without leaving a child. Princess Urena said nothing, not yet, because if Ifeoma possessed that pendant, there were only two possibilities. Either a servant had somehow obtained an object that should have been buried with a dead princess, or the dead princess had left something behind. Ifeoma, Princess Urena began investigating quietly. She visited Mama Ngozi. At first, the older woman refused to speak. Then Urena showed her an old photograph. The photograph showed a younger Princess Oluchi wearing the same pendant. Mama Ngozi began crying. The first truth finally emerged. Ifeoma's mother had not been an ordinary woman. Years earlier, Princess Oluchi had fallen in love with Chike Eze, a teacher from a respected but non-royal family. Her father opposed the relationship. Oluchi eventually left the royal household. When she became pregnant, a political struggle inside her family made the child dangerous. If Oluchi returned with a daughter, that child could one day possess inheritance rights tied to land and royal lineage. After threats were made, Oluchi disappeared. Mama Ngozi had been her closest friend. She helped Oluchi hide. After Oluchi died from complications following an illness several years later, Ngozi raised Ifeoma as her own. But she had promised never to reveal the truth, unless keeping silent became more dangerous than speaking. Princess Urena demanded proof. Mama Ngozi produced an old locked box. Inside were photographs, letters, a royal family seal, and a document recording Ifeoma's birth under another name. But one page was missing, the page identifying the people who had helped Oluchi escape. Someone had removed it years earlier. Mama Ngozi knew something else. Before Oluchi died, she had repeatedly warned that a woman connected to the Ajanaku palace knew about Ifeoma, but Oluchi never gave Mama Ngozi the full name. She used only one initial, Nen. Princess Urena returned to the palace disturbed. Meanwhile, Kosi had reached his own breaking point. His father ordered him to end all contact with Ifeoma. Kosi refused. The king threatened to remove him from several royal responsibilities. Kosi still refused. Then Queen Nneka made the threat she believed would finish everything. If Kosi insisted on marrying Ifeoma, the council could be encouraged to reconsider his position as heir. Kosi asked whether that was truly the price. His mother believed he would surrender. Instead, Kosi accepted the price. He was willing to lose the throne, and this happened before he knew anything about Ifeoma's ancestry. When Ifeoma learned what he had done, she finally understood that Kosi was no longer playing with rebellion. He had chosen her, when choosing her could cost him the future he had been raised to inherit. That was when she stopped running from what she felt. The investigation into the stolen bracelet also produced a surprise. A palace laundry worker admitted that one of Queen Nneka's personal attendants had ordered her into Ifeoma's room shortly before the bracelet was discovered. Under pressure, the attendant confessed that she had planted it. She claimed she had acted because she believed she was protecting the royal family. Nobody could prove Queen Nneka had directly ordered her. The Queen Mother was too careful for that. But Kosi no longer trusted the coincidence. Then Princess Urena returned with representatives from Umuagu. The same servant who had been expelled as a thief entered the palace again. This time, she entered beside royal elders. The documents were examined. The pendant was authenticated. A surviving relative identified Princess Oluchi in the photographs. Mamangozi gave her testimony, and a distinctive crescent-shaped birthmark beneath Ifeoma's left shoulder matched a detail recorded in an old letter Oluchi had written shortly after giving birth. Ifeoma Eze was formally recognized as the daughter of Princess Oluchi. Through her mother, she belonged to the Umuagu royal lineage. The revelation stunned the palace. People who had mocked Ifeoma suddenly struggled to meet her eyes. But Ifeoma herself did not celebrate immediately. She cried, not because she had become royal, because she had spent years believing her mother had left her almost nothing. Now she possessed letters written in her mother's own hand. For Ifeoma, the greatest inheritance was not a title. It was finally knowing that she had been loved. Queen Nneka, however, understood the political disaster. Every argument she had made against Ifeoma was collapsing. She had called the girl unworthy because of blood. Now Ifeoma possessed royal blood. She had called her an opportunist. Yet Kosi had chosen her before either of them knew the truth. She had called her dishonest. Now evidence suggested Ifeoma herself had been lied to since childhood. For the first time, Queen Nneka was losing control of the story. Then Princess Urena found something inside Oluchi's old documents that had nothing to do with Ifeoma. It was a photograph. Oluchi stood beside a younger Nneka, and beside Nneka stood a man named Emeka Nwosu. On the back, Oluchi had written a date. The date was less than a year before Prince Kosi's birth. There was also a folded note. Most of the ink had faded, but one sentence remained readable. It referred to money being sent so that Emeka would stay away from Nneka and their son. Their son. Princess Urena stared at the words for a long time. Then she locked the paper away. The mystery surrounding Ifeoma had been answered, but it had opened something far more dangerous. Who was Prince Kosi Ajanaku? Queen Nneka learned that Urena had found the photograph, and fear finally overcame restraint. She changed tactics. Instead of attacking Ifeoma, she apologized. Not publicly at first. Privately, she admitted that fear had made her harsh. She claimed she had spent her life protecting a dynasty and had mistaken protection for control. She asked Ifeoma for a chance to rebuild their relationship. Kosi did not trust the change. Ifeoma did not completely trust it either, but she wanted peace. And by then, another development had made peace feel even more important. Ifeoma discovered she was pregnant. The news transformed Kosi. For perhaps the first time since the conflict began, he looked genuinely happy, without anger sitting underneath it. Even King Obina softened. The possibility of a grandchild touched something beneath his pride. Queen Nneka embraced Ifeoma. She arranged special meals for her. She insisted that Ifeoma should no longer exhaust herself. She brought traditional tonics said to strengthen pregnant women. And because Ifeoma desperately wanted to believe hatred had finally ended, she accepted the kindness cautiously. What she did not know was that Queen Nneka had paid a disgraced herbal practitioner to prepare a substance that would slowly weaken her. The doses were small, Nothing dramatic, nothing that would immediately look like poisoning. Ifeoma began experiencing dizziness, then stomach pain, then weakness. Everyone assumed the pregnancy was difficult. Queen Nneka became the most attentive person around her. That was what made it horrifying. She would sit beside the young woman she was poisoning and behave like a concerned mother. One afternoon, after a particularly terrible night, Ifeoma thanked Queen Nneka for taking care of her despite everything that had happened between them. The Queen Mother smiled and handed her another cup of tonic. Ifeoma drank it. Hours later, she collapsed. The palace doctor became suspicious. Her symptoms did not match what he expected. Tests revealed traces of a dangerous herbal compound. Kosi ordered every substance Ifeoma had consumed collected. Queen Nneka remained calm. She had expected suspicion. The bottle in her room contained nothing dangerous. The herbal practitioner had been paid through intermediaries. The servants involved knew almost nothing. Once again, the Queen Mother had protected herself. But she made one mistake. Adaeze, the same servant Ifeoma had once protected over the broken bowl, had noticed that the Queen Mother's attendant replaced Ifeoma's tonic bottle every few days. Adaeze remembered, and this time she protected Ifeoma. She secretly kept one discarded bottle instead of throwing it away. The palace doctor tested it. The poison was there. Kosi still needed proof connecting it to his mother, so they set a trap. The doctor announced privately that Ifeoma would recover quickly because the suspicious tonic had been removed. That information was allowed to reach Queen Nneka. That evening, another bottle appeared. Adaeze saw the attendant carrying it. The attendant was stopped. Inside the bottle was the same compound. Under interrogation, she broke down. The chain eventually led to the herbal practitioner, and the payment records led back to a private account controlled by Queen Nneka. Kosi confronted his mother with the evidence. There was no escape this time. His grief was worse than his anger. This was the woman who had raised him. The woman who had taught him that the royal family survived because family came first, and she had tried to kill the woman carrying his child. Queen Nneka saw something in Kosi's face that terrified her more than shouting would have. He was finished with her, so she reached for the one weapon she still possessed. Truth. If Kosi wanted to investigate hidden crimes, she suggested, then perhaps he should investigate himself. Kosi initially thought it was another manipulation. Then Princess Urena entered with the photograph and the faded letter. King Obina saw Emeka Nwosu's face and sat down. He knew the name. The silence that followed told Kosi that his father knew more than he had ever admitted. Emeka Nwosu was found alive. He had spent decades living quietly in another state. He resisted coming to the palace. Eventually, he agreed. And when he saw Kosi, the resemblance was impossible to ignore. The final proof came through a paternity test. Prince Kosi Ajanaku was not King Obina's biological son. The revelation destroyed him. For days, Kosi avoided almost everyone. The throne suddenly felt like stolen property. His childhood memories changed meaning. Every lesson about royal blood sounded like mockery. Every time his mother had spoken about purity became another lie. Worst of all, he wondered whether King Obina had ever truly considered him a son. The answer was complicated. King Obina had discovered the truth when Kosi was 5. By then, he loved the boy. He had also been unable to father another child. A public scandal would have destroyed Nneka and thrown the succession into chaos. So he buried the truth. He paid Emeka to stay away. He raised Kosi as his own, but he never completely forgave Nneka. And somewhere along the way, his resentment had turned into emotional distance from the child who had done nothing wrong. Kosi finally understood why his father had sometimes treated the throne like a debt Kosi needed to repay rather than an inheritance. King Obina also understood his own failure. He had punished a son for a betrayal committed by the mother. For the first time, the two men faced the truth without titles between them. Kosi decided he would surrender his claim. He would not build his future on another secret. But the royal council faced an unexpected problem. Legally and traditionally, Kosi had been publicly acknowledged by King Obina from childhood. Obina had named him his son. He had been initiated according to royal custom. Removing him was not as simple as revealing biology. Some elders wanted him gone. Others argued that fatherhood in their tradition included public recognition and responsibility, not only blood. The kingdom divided, and through all of it, Ifeoma remained beside Kosi, not because he was a prince. Now, perhaps more than ever, he might cease to be one. She reminded him of the lesson he had once struggled to understand. A title did not create character. Losing one could not erase character either. For the first time, Kosi understood what Ifeoma had known her entire life. A human being had to possess worth before society gave them a name for it. Queen Nneka, meanwhile, lost almost everything. Her accounts were frozen pending investigation. Her personal attendants were removed. The council stripped her of several ceremonial powers. King Obina refused to defend her. Kosi would barely look at her. Even families who once feared her began distancing themselves. The woman who had controlled the palace was becoming isolated inside it. Normal power had failed her. Warnings had failed. Money had failed. Humiliation had failed. Expulsion had failed. Poison had failed. So Queen Nneka went where desperation often sends people who cannot accept defeat, into darkness. Far outside the kingdom lived a feared spiritualist named Ezeani. Queen Nneka visited him at night. She did not ask for wisdom, she asked for control. Ezeani gave her a small black bottle containing a dark liquid. Its power was simple. One drop placed on a person's tongue would bind that person's will to the first command the user gave. But there were 3 rules. Only 3. The first rule was that no person must receive more than 1 drop. The second rule was that the controlled person must never be commanded to spill the blood of their own bloodline. The third rule was that before sunrise, the controlled person must never touch the bottle. Break even 1 rule and the power would reverse. Not weaken, not disappear, reverse. The victim's will would return, and the force of every command given through the bottle would turn back toward the person who had used it. Ezeani warned Queen Nneka that the rules did not care whether the person holding the bottle was a servant or a queen. That warning should have stopped her. Instead, it offended her. She had spent her entire life believing rules existed to protect people like her from people beneath her. Somewhere inside herself, she had already decided that even spiritual laws could eventually be bent. At first, however, she obeyed. Her first target was Chief Nwafor, one of the most influential members of the royal council. 1 drop, 1 command. By the next morning, the chief who had demanded Queen Nneka's removal was suddenly defending her. He argued that the kingdom needed stability. He persuaded other elders to delay proceedings against her. Queen Nneka regained access to palace meetings. Her second target was the head of the royal guard. Again, 1 drop. Again, 1 command. He ordered several guards loyal to Kosi reassigned. Queen Nneka began rebuilding power. Her third target was a senior palace administrator who controlled records and official communications. Soon, documents implicating Queen Nneka in Ifeoma's poisoning began disappearing. Statements changed. Witnesses became frightened. For the first time since her secrets had been exposed, Queen Nneka was winning. Kosi could not understand what was happening. People who had condemned his mother days earlier now defended her with unnatural intensity. Then the council made a shocking announcement. Until the succession dispute was resolved, Kosi would be suspended from several royal duties. Worse, Ifeoma was accused of conspiring with outsiders to destabilize the Ajanaku dynasty so that the Umuagu royal family could gain influence through her unborn child. The accusation was absurd. But documents appeared to support it. The same palace that had finally acknowledged Ifeoma now turned against her again. This time, Queen Nneka barely had to raise her voice. That made her more frightening. Ifeoma was placed under guarded confinement while the accusations were investigated. Kosi attempted to reach her. The guards refused him. King Obina ordered her release. Chief Nwafor overruled him through an emergency council procedure. The king realized something was terribly wrong. Adaeze noticed it too. She remembered the administrator who had once treated Ifeoma kindly. Now the man seemed almost empty. He repeated Queen Nneka's arguments with the same strange calmness. Then Adaeze saw something else. Late one night, she saw Queen Nneka entering the administrator's room, carrying a black bottle. Adaeze followed from a distance. She could not hear everything, but she saw the Queen Mother place something on the man's tongue. She ran to Princess Urena. Urena had heard stories about objects like the bottle. She understood enough to know that confronting Nneka without understanding the rules could make everything worse. Meanwhile, Queen Nneka decided to end the problem permanently. She summoned the head of the royal guard. Her plan was to use him to remove Ifeoma before sunrise and make the death appear like an escape attempt. But Kosi discovered where Ifeoma was being held. He reached the courtyard just as the guards brought her out. Queen Nneka watched from a balcony. Everything she hated was standing below her. The servant she had failed to break, the son who had rejected her control, the unborn child who represented both of them. And for the first time that night, her anger became stronger than her discipline. She commanded the controlled guard commander to stop Kosi by force. He hesitated. The charm compelled him forward. Kosi refused to move. Queen Nneka became furious. She gave another command. She ordered the guard commander to spill the blood of anyone who tried to take Ifeoma away. Anyone. The commander raised his weapon, then froze, because Kosi was standing directly between him and Ifeoma. Queen Nneka did not know what the guard commander knew. Years earlier, before joining the royal guard, the commander's younger sister had given birth to a son fathered by Emeka Nwosu. That child and Kosi shared the same biological father. By blood, Kosi belonged to the commander's extended bloodline through his sister's child. The command Queen Nneka had just given required the controlled man to spill the blood of his own bloodline. The second rule, Princess Urena realized it first, then Adaeze, then the commander's entire body began trembling. Queen Nneka still did not understand. She shouted another command. The black bottle shook in her hand. The guard commander dropped his weapon. His eyes cleared. Chief Nwafor, elsewhere in the palace, suddenly collapsed to his knees as the control over him broke. The administrator regained awareness. Every person touched by the charm began remembering what had happened. And the power reversed. Queen Nneka felt it before she understood it. The fear she had forced into others returned to her. The helplessness she had created returned to her. Her hands began shaking. She tried to run, but the same guard commander she had controlled ordered the gates sealed. Not because of magic, because his own will had returned. The manipulated administrator immediately revealed where the missing poisoning records had been hidden. Chief Nwafor confessed that his sudden political reversal had not been voluntary. The Queen Mother's victory collapsed in minutes. But pride had not finished destroying her. She still had the bottle, and she remembered the first rule, 1 drop per person. She believed that perhaps the reversal could be corrected if she used another drop on the commander. Ezeani's warning had been clear, never more than 1 drop on the same person. Queen Nneka ignored it. She seized the commander and forced a second drop toward his mouth. Ifeoma screamed for her to stop. Even Kosi understood what she was doing. But Queen Nneka had reached the point where surrender felt worse than destruction. The second drop touched the commander's tongue. The bottle cracked. The dark liquid spilled across Queen Nneka's hand, and every command she had issued through it returned to its source. Her knees gave way. She began speaking uncontrollably, not because the charm invented new truths. It forced back upon her the obedience she had demanded from everyone else. She had ordered others to surrender their will. Now she could no longer command her own silence. The secrets came out. She admitted arranging the bracelet in Ifeoma's room. She admitted paying intermediaries to poison her. She admitted knowing years earlier that Princess Oluchi had fled with a child. That was the missing connection. Long before Ifeoma entered the palace as a servant, Nneka had known that Oluchi's daughter existed. Years earlier, Oluchi had discovered Nneka's affair with Emeka. Oluchi had never exposed her, but Nneka feared that if Oluchi returned to royal circles, the old secret could surface. So when Oluchi disappeared, Nneka paid people to make certain nobody searched too hard. She had not caused Oluchi's death, but she had helped erase her. She had helped make sure Ifeoma grew up without knowing who she was. Years later, fate brought the same child into Nneka's palace. and Nneka had failed to recognize her until she saw the pendant. That was why she had looked terrified on the day Kosi publicly chose Ifeoma. It was never only about class. Ifeoma represented a buried past walking back into the palace. Kosi listened as the foundation of his childhood collapsed one final time. Then he asked the question that hurt more than any other. Had his mother ever loved him, or had he merely been the instrument she used to secure her position? Queen Nneka could barely answer, because the truth was uglier than either possibility. She had loved him, deeply, but she had loved power too. And over the years, she had become unable to distinguish protecting her son from controlling him. She had spent decades terrified that someone would discover Kosi was the son of a man she considered socially beneath the royal family. Instead of allowing that truth to humble her, she had become obsessed with bloodline. Every insult she directed at commoners had been an attempt to distance herself from her own secret. She despised in Ifeoma the very thing she feared people would see in her. Ifeoma stood before the woman who had humiliated her, expelled her, poisoned her, threatened her unborn child, and helped bury the truth about her mother. Everyone expected anger. Ifeoma was angry, but she refused to become cruel. She did not forgive Queen Nneka, not then. Some actions required consequences before conversations about forgiveness could even begin. But Ifeoma also refused to celebrate the sight of an older woman collapsing beneath the weight of her own choices. She asked the guards to take the broken bottle away. She asked that Queen Nneka receive medical attention, and she made one thing clear through her actions. Mercy did not mean absence of justice. Queen Nneka would answer for what she had done. The supernatural force had exposed her. Human law would judge her. The council reconvened. This time there was no manipulation. Queen Nneka was stripped of her royal authority. The poisoning case was reopened with the recovered evidence. Her involvement in witness intimidation, falsification of records, and attempted violence was formally investigated. She was removed from the palace while proceedings continued. The woman who once decided who was worthy to enter the royal household left through the same gates she had once ordered Ifeoma to leave. But there was no celebration from Ifeoma, only silence, because victory did not return the years she had lost with her mother. It did not erase Kosi's identity crisis. It did not undo the poison she had consumed. It simply stopped the damage from continuing. The greatest question remaining concerned the throne. Kosi no longer wanted it automatically. He stood before the council prepared to renounce his claim. King Obinna stopped him. For years, Obinna had hidden behind tradition because tradition was easier than admitting pain. Now he finally told the kingdom what he should have told Kosi privately many years earlier. Kosi was not his biological child, but Kosi was his son. Obinna had fed him, raised him, corrected him, protected him, prepared him, loved him badly at times. Resented circumstances Kosi had not created. But fatherhood had happened anyway. The king acknowledged his own failure. He had allowed Nneka's betrayal to poison part of his relationship with an innocent child. The council debated for days. Some elders insisted blood could not be ignored. Others argued that if the kingdom removed a man who had been legally acknowledged and raised as the king's son simply because of a secret he had never known, they would be punishing Kosi for his mother's wrongdoing. Kosi eventually made his own position clear. He would not fight for the throne merely because he had been promised it. If the kingdom believed he was unfit, he would walk away. But if he remained heir, he would not continue pretending leadership was a privilege of blood alone. That position changed the debate. The young man who once assumed the throne belonged to him now understood that leadership had to be justified through service. The council ultimately upheld his status as the king's legally acknowledged son and heir. But Kosi accepted under new conditions. Palace employment practices were reformed. Royal development funds became subject to independent review. Ordinary community representatives were given a stronger voice in several advisory bodies. The changes were not miracles. They did not suddenly make everyone equal. But Kosi had learned something from the woman he loved. Power meant very little if the people beneath it could be crushed without anyone important noticing. Adana Okafor handled the collapse of the arranged marriage with more dignity than many expected. She had been humiliated publicly by Kosi's original declaration, and she never pretended otherwise. She told both families through her actions that she would not compete for a man who had already chosen someone else. She left the arrangement and later took control of an expansion project within her father's company. Ifeoma respected her for refusing to turn another woman into an enemy over a decision neither of them had created. Months passed, Ifeoma recovered. Her pregnancy survived the poisoning. Her relationship with Mama Ngozi changed too. There was pain between them. Ifeoma struggled with the fact that the woman who raised her had hidden something so important. Mama Ngozi accepted that anger. She did not demand immediate forgiveness. Eventually, Ifeoma understood why she had remained silent. Fear had controlled too many people in the story. Mama Ngozi had feared losing Ifeoma. King Obina had feared scandal. Emeka had feared royal power. Queen Nneka had feared exposure. And every secret created by fear had eventually demanded a price. Ifeoma visited Umuagu often. She learned about Princess Oluchi. She met relatives she never knew existed. She walked through rooms where old photographs of her mother still hung. But she never abandoned the name Eze. That name belonged to the father who had loved her mother. It belonged to the life she had actually lived. Royal blood could explain where she came from. It would not erase who she had become. Kosi eventually asked her to marry him again. This time there were no shocked chiefs, no arranged bride, no political spectacle, no servant carrying a tray. Only two people who had nearly lost everything because they refused to let other people decide what their lives were worth. Ifeoma accepted. Their wedding brought together both royal families, but Ifeoma refused several extravagant traditions that treated palace workers as invisible decorations. Adaeze attended as a guest. Mama Ngozi sat with family. Princess Urena watched from the front, wearing the satisfied expression of a woman who had spent months pulling buried truths into daylight. King Obina stood beside Kosi. Emeka attended quietly. His relationship with Kosi remained complicated. Biology had made them father and son. Time had made them strangers. Neither man pretended one meeting could repair decades. They began slowly, and perhaps that was healthier than forcing a perfect reunion, because the truth had finally come out. Queen Nneka did not attend the wedding. Her legal case continued. Kosi visited her once before the ceremony. He did not restore her position. He did not pretend nothing had happened. He simply refused to carry hatred into the family he was about to build. Whether their relationship would ever fully heal remained uncertain. Some wounds did not disappear because someone finally regretted causing them. Several months after the wedding, Ifeoma gave birth to a healthy baby girl. The child became a symbol people argued about for all the wrong reasons. Some celebrated that she carried connections to two royal houses. Others discussed succession. Ifeoma cared about something simpler. Her daughter would never be raised to believe another human being was beneath her because of the family into which they had been born. One afternoon, long after the palace had settled into its new reality, Ifeoma walked through the same corridor she had once scrubbed as punishment. A newly employed servant saw her approaching. The young woman became nervous. She lowered her head and bowed deeply. Ifeoma stopped. For a moment, she remembered herself, the uniform, the long hours, the whispers, the stolen bracelet. The day she had walked through the palace gates, carrying everything she owned. She remembered people who had treated her kindly, only after learning there was royal blood in her veins, and she understood the danger. If she accepted their respect, because she had turned out to be royal, then Queen Nneka's worldview would survive through her. So Ifeoma asked the young servant to stand upright. Not because Ifeoma had forgotten tradition, because she remembered humiliation. She treated the girl with the same respect she would have wanted when she was the one carrying trays through those corridors. That small moment revealed more about the future of the kingdom than any coronation could have done. Because Ifeoma had discovered something Queen Nneka never understood. Royal blood could give a person a title. It could give them a palace. It could give them inheritance, influence, and a seat among powerful people. But it could not give them character. Character was revealed by what a person did when they possessed enough power to hurt someone weaker and chose not to. And perhaps that was the greatest irony of Queen Nneka's downfall. The woman who had spent her life protecting royal blood nearly destroyed her own family because the son she called royal was biologically the child of a commoner. While the servant she considered unworthy had carried royal blood all along, yet neither truth was what made Kosi worthy of leadership, and neither truth was what made Ifeoma worthy of love. They had proven those things before anyone opened the first letter, examined the first photograph, or recognized the first pendant. Before we end, there is one question I want you to answer in the comments. Do you believe King Obinna and the Royal Council were right to allow Kosi to remain heir after discovering that he was not the king's biological son? Or should the throne have passed to someone else? And if this story kept you watching to the end, subscribe, because there are more powerful stories of love, betrayal, hidden identities, and justice waiting for you. In the end, the palace learned a truth that had taken years of suffering to uncover. A crown may reveal your position, but how you treat those beneath you reveals who you truly are.